I've been seeing a lot of negative press about the Google Pixel Watch. Every time I flip through my feed, I see headlines and comments about how this watch is a total mess. I've worn the Google Pixel Watch on my wrist every single day since Google sent us a unit prior to launch, and I can honestly say that I don't get it. Just so we're clear, I don't get the negativity aimed at the watch, as I think it's absolutely terrific. So let's try to explore what the Pixel Watch actually is in comparison to where the Android smartwatch world was prior to its release. I've basically seen and worn just about every type of wearable time-telling device you can fathom. I wrote an article last year talking about my early smartwatch journey and why the Apple Watch has dominated the scene since then. At the time, the Pixel Watch was still just a long-tenured rumor stuck in the mill. Whenever I was on Android over the last few years, either an Amazfit, a Galaxy Watch, or a Fossil Watch occupied that spot on my wrist. They all functioned in a way that was beneficial to me to keep around, but I never really felt immersed with these watches in my life. I talked about that in the article and why I thought the Apple Watch was a perfect blend of many things that just worked and looked good doing it. When I put that Pixel Watch on my wrist for the first time, I began feeling some of those same exact vibes. One of the original core functions a smartwatch is useful for is to quickly glance at a notification or text message. The way a watch displays and has that user interact with those set messages is of high importance to me. As much as I love the 1-month battery life of watches like the Mobvoi TicWatch GTH or the Halo RS4, reading any legible text is a major headache on those things that drove me to just take them off. That's a consistent trade-off for those type of watches. When you move over to the field that the Pixel competes with, watches like the Fossil Gen 5e and the Galaxy Watch that I reviewed in recent years, they present information much more neatly than those aforementioned cheaper watches. However, the way the user interacts with that information still kind of varies on these more expensive watches. Back in the early days of the Galaxy watches, Samsung introduced a rotating bezel that in theory could kind of be competitive to the crown found on the Apple Watch and of course now the Pixel Watch. I have always kind of resonated towards the scrolling with the crown method. Apple has thoroughly convinced me over the years that this is the most effective manner of navigating information in a small allotted space. I'm terribly glad that Google actually blatantly copied the Apple Watch in this manner. There must have been some sort of market research that they had that led them to make this design choice. From my own anecdotal experience after spending equal amounts of years with the spinning bezel and also a crown on my wrist, I found myself naturally at ease utilizing the crown's navigation, whereas the spinning bezel settled into kind of like a secondary method behind my finger on the S2 and also Galaxy watches. However, the crown of the Pixel Watch doesn't feel anything like the one on the Apple Watches. There's a definite lack of premium touch to the material used for this crown. Every time I press into it, there is a slight creaking noise that emits. I don't find the reflective glossy nature of the crown to help the cause either, as it only adds to the flimsy aura that it exudes. Using the competitors as an example, the buttons on the Galaxy Watch have a nice solid texture on it. The crown on the Apple Watches are usually matted and extraordinarily smooth to operate. What I'm trying to explain is that while this watch doesn't win in many categories against the competition, the actual experience of interacting with this type of gadget is actually better on this Pixel Watch than any of the competitors that are capable of pairing with Android. It's not light years better than other premium smartwatches like the Galaxy Watch, but to me, it does make a big difference in how I feel about the watch that I wear. While we're on the topic of the display, the 41mm diameter is the single model that is offered by Google in their first foray into this new lineup. That means that the AMOLED screen on my watch is the only size a Pixel Watch offers. It has a 320 ppi count that keeps text sharp enough to read at an arm's distance. I think that the colors and saturation are pretty good for what it is. I can't say that my eyes truly enjoyed looking at personal images as backgrounds more on the Pixel Watch than I did on, say, the Apple Watch SE or the Galaxy Watch, but they're also plenty acceptable here from a palette standpoint. The watch also gets moderately bright at max brightness. I never once had a difficult time viewing the watch face, even with adaptive brightness managing it. I will give this watch praise, as the AMOLED technology does help blend the black with the somewhat large bezels around the watch face. At first glance, it's hard to even notice it when you're using a black watch face. Honestly, the bezels didn't really bother me as much, as I did prefer the smaller footprint the Pixel Watch had on my wrist. If that's what it took to keep the watch at the size instead of having an edge-to-edge display, I think it was a better choice. The one thing I still don't know if I like or dislike is the mechanism for the clasp that changes the watch bands. It requires users to kind of learn the little trick it takes to rotate in order to get it to work. The first 5 minutes were truly frustrating for me. Once you do get the handle of it, though, the method does feel a little neat to pull off. However, I don't think this is something that was really necessary. There's no need to reinvent the wheel here. Sure, Apple patented a great way to change bands, but the pin method on basically every other watch works perfectly fine. If it was a truly better and more efficient way of changing the bands, then yeah, sure, I'd be all for it. Months later, though, I still don't see it and would have preferred the more traditional method. I don't gravitate towards the smooth glass appearance that falls off like a waterfall on the display. I'm a bit of a traditionalist and a kind of like a Seamaster admirer, so having some sort of physical bezel on a round watch face is more attractive in appearance to me. I get why Google simply followed the Apple Watch playbook and just threw a round screen on the top of the frame, but a square watch can kind of get away with that a little bit easier, at least in my opinion. This is where I do think Samsung, through the many generations and tinkering of their bezel, has an advantage. And actual watch companies like Fossil have a better understanding of round watch design and what to do with the bezel there. I do notice things that the Pixel Watch can learn to improve on from its competitors. We have access to the Play Store for apps, but the way we interact with the apps on WearOS is pretty terrible, at least right now. You click on the crown and you literally have a list that you scroll down. That is a terribly painful way of going through the apps you want to find. Apple and Samsung don't have it down perfectly either, but the app icon bubble method is much more aesthetically pleasing and I would say easier to interact with as well. Alphabetical order keeps things from getting messy, I guess, but it isn't overly effective if you want to search for an app like, say, Spotify, which is lower towards the order. If you use a specific app often, you can, I guess, hit the button above the crown for recent apps, but that's not a fundamental excuse for an overall user experience with controlling applications. The Pixel Watch is also, I guess, missing some features that we've grown accustomed to over the years on other smartwatches. This is more of a notable thing the more premium your smartwatch experience has been in the past. On the one hand, since I don't track my sleep in my daily usage, my watch settles onto my nightstand where the magnetic charging cradle sits. I actually have gone through a good battery life experience with the Pixel Watch using an always-on display tethered to my phone. While I never really relied on my wearable as like a fitness tool, I'm sure a lot of you guys do, instead focusing more on a business utilization usage, your mileage may vary, I guess, depending on what your lifestyle really resembles. Strapping it onto my wrist at 9 a.m. and taking it off around midnight, the battery routinely drops to about 50% before coming back onto the charger. Fundamentally, that gives me about an estimated day and a half of battery life. That's in the comparable ballpark to other smartwatches I would categorize this thing to compete in. Until the day that some OEM out there fuses the longevity of those fitness trackers like Amazfits with the user experience of a smartwatch, we have to kind of live with these compromises on both of the formats. For my daily life, this battery is more than suitable. I do think the WearOS 3.5 experience on the Pixel Watch is a huge improvement over where the platform was just a few years ago. I was complaining about how clunky navigating the OS felt as recently as 2020. I did not feel that way though here with the Pixel Watch at all. In fact, there's only minor changes I would like to see tinkered with for the next software version. That's a great sign for Google, as software has weirdly been a huge lacking point of emphasis for this company in the wearable space, as the platform has not evolved. That's the best way to put it. While Apple has continued to refine watchOS, wearOS has essentially been dormant in tactful functionality development. It's strange. Pairing the watch to Android phones, though, was really simple. That's one part they got right. I matched the Pixel Watch with the Pixel 7 Pro, Asus Zenfone 9, and Nothing Phone 1. The connection process has been near instant. It's Apple-esque. Props to them there. It's been terrific connecting this to new phones. On the flip side of that, I did come across software bugs, some of them. They were resolved relatively easily, but I can see how that would be frustrating for less tech-savvy owners. Like, one of the specific cases I had was an app consistently force loading without touching. I wasn't touching it. It required a few soft resets to finally get the watch to clear it out. I was also locked out of my watch during the setup process a couple times, as the pin input would constantly freeze up as it asked me for my information. So when I was typing it, it was always getting it wrong. That required a hard reset and took me a bit of Googling to figure out actually how to do that. I don't think any of that actually has to do with the Exynos 9110 chipset more than just straight up software kinks. The reason I say this is because, unlike, say, the Fossil Gen 5e, which I did feel was just sufficient enough for daily usage, while the watch with the SD Wear 3100 chipset didn't have lag issues, it did feel slower in responding to my input. I had none of that here with the Pixel Watch, interestingly enough. All my swiping and commands just felt instant. The last thing I did find to be lacking is the speaker on the Pixel Watch. It's so terrible in projection quality that it's nearly unusable.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very clearly.
Oh, that's good, because I can't hear you too well on this watch.
Oh, is my voice very faded?
Yeah, it's very distant.
I see. Well,
Yeah.
I can hear you very clearly.
Yeah, even at full volume, it's a little distant. Can you sing me a song?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Serena.
So is the Pixel Watch perfect? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But it does the things I use a smartwatch to do in a clean and user-friendly manner. I glance at notifications at least 50 to 100 times a day, and the Pixel Watch delivers that information to me in the best presentation I can find on Android. That's a big selling point to me. It may not be for others. I use GPay just about daily with this watch, and I do love the haptic feedback I receive from this watch. It's not like other watches can't use payments. Basically everyone can. Once again, I personally don't feel like it's also an Apple Watch level of experience, but it's one of the better ones I've used on the Android platform. So I keep saying that over and over in this review. That essentially is what the Pixel Watch is to me. It's not as good as an Apple Watch experience, but it's the closest to it on Android. It's a good overall package that handles just about everything I want in a smartwatch cleanly and efficiently. To me, that is something that I have been salivating for years now. I'm actually quite content with a Pixel Watch. I know it's really odd to say this for a first generation product, but I'll be extremely excited to see the improvements for the second iteration when it comes. But for now, I really am enjoying the Pixel Watch. And this is as close of an Apple Watch experience on Android as we've ever come to, and I'm looking forward to seeing more.
You know what I like? Likes. You know what I don't like? A non-subscriber. So please subscribe and stay tuned for more.